The upcoming Little Mermaid is the latest movie to be on the receiving end of internet backlash. Since the launch of the first trailer, fans immediately started pushing back. The reason for the backlash is a bit more complicated than many would like to think. Although it is easy to dismiss all of the criticism simply as fans not liking the lead actress, fan outrage does run a bit deeper. Live-action Disney remakes have always been a bit of a sore subject for many. Although live-action movies are nothing new for Disney, turning old classic animations into CGI-filled films with real actors is. It is hard to say exactly what the jump-off point was for this trend, but for me, it was the 2016 Jungle Book movie. During this time, the hope for Disney live-action remakes was still very high. The Jungle Book managed to score quite well amongst both fans and critics. It was also a big box office draw, bringing in almost $1 billion. If you adjust that for inflation, you can understand why Disney decided to double down and do even more of these films. Beauty and the Beast followed Jungle Book into the theaters, and although it was not received as well, it was still a massive box office success. It made well over $1 billion, and with that, Disney most likely felt even more emboldened to continue. With that, the revenue for these movies might have increased year over year, but the audience review scores definitely declined. The Lion King was kind of the turning point for many fans. This is an absolute classic and for many, the best movie that they ever produced. With this much love for the film, everyone knew that it was only a matter of time before Disney tried to cash in. Now, cash in is kind of an understatement because they did way more than that. This movie was by far the most successful in terms of box office numbers, even if you adjust for inflation. They made over $1.6 billion, and for the most part, everything has been deemed a success. There was one problem though. This remake scored by far the lowest amongst fans and critics. Many did not seem to enjoy the lifeless CGI. Although live-action remakes with people is much better, it is a bit harder to look the other way with animals. CGI cannot capture emotion within animals the way animation can. Thus, many of the most emotional scenes within the Lion King remake just felt flat. This is especially true for musical numbers. For the 2019 remake of Aladdin, things were a bit more divided. Although critics scored it quite low, fans were a bit more split. It might not have scored as high as some of the other movies, but it was still a box office success, once again cracking that $1 billion mark. With all of these movies making so much money, Disney was bound to announce their next project. All of this brings us to The Little Mermaid. First and foremost, we have to address the elephant in the room. Whether or not we would like to admit this, the race of the actress playing Ariel was a huge point of contention. Many people do not like race swapping. Race swapping and sex swapping is something that has been happening in Hollywood for years now. It would be easy to dismiss critics of this practice as simply being racist and sexist, but that would ignore some of the fundamental arguments. Many who push back against race swapping and sex swapping do not have a problem with black people or women. What they have a problem with is pandering. Studios will make a movie about a gay person and censor it in certain places. They will make a stormtrooper black and then shrink him down in China. None of these large corporations pretending to care about representation actually cares about any of these causes. They will flip around tomorrow if it meant that they could make more money. Now, at the end of the day, many would still agree that representation is important. If it takes large corporations like Disney pandering in order to get more diversity, most would take that deal. Unfortunately, when this happens, a larger problem comes into play. Before we address that, it is also important to acknowledge that some people's problems with race swapping do run a lot more shallow than that. There are those who simply do not like any character that is not white or straight. Pretending that these people do not exist would be extremely dishonest. These are the people who would always say that they do not have an issue with race or sex. What they have an issue with is swapping characters around. They would say, if you want representation, create a new IP. Then when unique films with gay and black leads get created, these same people label it a woke disaster. It is worth pointing out that this is a small problem though. As much as the media would like to turn every piece of criticism into toxic fandoms not liking certain groups, most times it is not true. This does bring me to the larger problem I was referring to a while ago. Hollywood does like to pander. They claim to be all about inclusion and would build a cast that represents every marginalized person you can think of. However, this is where they stop. The entire focus of the film or movie revolves around how diverse the cast is, but in the process of doing that, they forget to write a good script that would do their actors justice. This is a very serious problem we see happen all the time. Even amongst very well-intentional directors and studios. They advertise their movies around inclusion, forget to actually write a good script, and when everything eventually bombs, they blame toxic fans. In that process, they also end up hurting the groups they claim to represent. A recent perfect example of this method would be Velma on HBO Max. It is a really unfortunate and complicated problem, and sadly, there is no easy solution. Personally, I have always been a big advocate for diversity and inclusion. I think representation in all forms is important. important. I have never had any issues with race or sex swapping. I understand the importance of including people, and my criteria for a good movie extends well above the skin color or sexual orientation of a person. I do not care what color Superman is. There is a long list of things that I consider when thinking about what makes a good Man of Steel, and his skin color does not even appear on that list. That, however, is my own personal opinion. You are allowed to disagree with that. And if you do, it does not make you a racist, no matter what the media tries to tell you. When it comes to The Little Mermaid, we do need to look at this problem through a bigger lens. Again, first and foremost, we need to be honest. There were those who were upset over a black actress. Pretending that it is not true is dishonest. However, pretending that it is a massive problem would also be dishonest. Another big criticism of this movie is the CGI. Little Mermaid is finding itself with the exact same problem as Lion King. CGI animals just cannot capture emotions the same way as animation. Disney has always had a CGI problem, and with this movie, we can see that clearly. It simply does not look good. In the middle of all of this is obviously Halle Bailey, who I do feel bad for. She had been the subject of massive debate and criticism, and that cannot be easy. On the one side, you have people attacking her for not being white. Although this criticism might come from a very small group of losers, it does still suck to hear it. On the other hand, you have the pandering media who always makes everything about race. Whenever they interview this actress about the movie, no one ever asks her about the actual film. They do not ask about the story. They do not ask about the experience. All they focus on is her skin color. As such, it can be very easy for these actors to think that the larger fan base has a problem with them. We see this all the time. 10 people make a tweet, 50 articles get written about it, and just like that, now we have an issue. The actual issue might not be real since there is a world outside of the internet, but for the people caught up in this, it can be quite hard. As such, Halle Bailey did decide to do an interview where she actually discussed the backlash that she was receiving. She pushed back against racist comments, stating that it was to be expected. Now, usually the worst thing that you can do in these situations is label all fans bad. Sometimes, you get emotional and then you tell fans if you do not like it, do not watch it. Usually, fans comply. The best way to address all of this is to simply say, hey, we have a great movie. I think you will enjoy it if you give it a try. Hope to see you in the movie theater. This is the best way not to alienate the fanbase. However, I will also admit that I have never been the subject of a racist attack. As such, I have no idea how it feels, so it would not be fair for me to tell others how to act. I will say though that I am not giving these thoughts as a person of color. I am giving it as a fan. There is nothing more off-putting than an actor going after the fanbase. I still do not like Brie Larson after all of the things she said. Doing this just never ends well. Be that as it may though, ultimately only time will tell how all of this is going to turn out. Little Mermaid is set to release later this year. Only then will we know how good or bad it truly is.